allows us to create different alerts for different events that are happening in our client sites. And when those events, they go into our UL certified command center, where our agents, who are all former military or law enforcement, receive those events. When they receive those events, they assess the situation. And if they see that it's a crime in progress, they immediately voice down through live speakers on the site. And when they voice down, they say, they see that individual hopping over a fence. They say, hey, you in the hoodie, we're watching you, recording you, and law enforcement's on the way. 96% of the time, those individuals are leaving our properties. The other 4% of the time, we are calling law enforcement. They're either making a detainment and or an arrest. So it's very effective. So again, the whole goal for us is being able to be there on time for us to be able to see somebody breaching, doing a live voice down within seconds. And doing that live voice down helps us prevent crime on our customers' properties. So it's a mix of the technology with the cameras, the artificial intelligence, our command center, and the right people in our command center that are trained to mitigate crime, and that law enforcement partnership. That's who Elite is and what we do. And what I'll show you next is a quick video of our services in action. I'll preface this video by saying that the people on this speaking in this video are our law enforcement advisory board that is comprised of police chiefs from across the country, and a client who is also a former deputy chief for Canyon, which is a $40 billion hedge fund company. We protect all of their multifamily assets.
Elite actually prevents crimes. The overwhelming majority of situations that come into the command center are handled internally without even bothering law enforcement.
Attention to the individual property. You're trespassing. Park there immediately.
When an incident happens at a property covered by Elite, within 7 seconds of any type of breach, our security agents are on it and on the phone to the local police department. That's phenomenal when it comes to response time.
Multifamily, commercial, mixed use, corporate offices. The technology is so flexible that it is able to really protect a wide variety of properties. And we have found that by having the remote guard system and the technology that Elite provides, we get better coverage. We have a much higher success rate with intervening and preventing crime. And it is also much less expensive to do the remote guard system than it is to have actual security guards patrolling a property.
For lack of a better term, and for just simplicity, it works.
By the way, that video also shows the cameras, and those are all real events for events that happen on our sites. So the way that we do it is through a combination of different technologies. We have different 16 different elements to our technology stack and methodologies that we employ. And all of them are key in being able to prevent crime. The only way, our mission is not to miss an event at Elite and to be able to prevent crime from happening on our client sites. And the only way that that happens is through that technology. And the only way that we can prevent crime is by eliminating false alarms that come into our command center so that we can get to events quickly. And when we get to those events quickly, we're able to, at that point, be able to dissuade somebody from committing the crime. As part of those technologies and processes that we deploy, it goes everything from forensic design, understanding our clients' sites specifically, their specific security challenges that they're facing and how we address those using the right technology and equipment to be able to get the correct alerts that we need, to ongoing support with systems like Viacu to determine the health of the systems, or AI Argus that allow us to know whether a device has moved out of its position, which would then potentially create vulnerability if a camera inadvertently or maliciously gets moved out of position. So all of these key elements help us reduce the noise in our command center, and make us more effective at not missing any event. And the next slide, I'll show you kind of our data, our key stats for 2024. So our command center processes over 42 million hours of video. So that could be very overwhelming if you don't have the right technology. And our command center is served up through the AI almost 73,000 of those hours. So again, it's leveraging that technology to be able to reduce the false alarm noise. And what that allows us to do in our command center to do is focus on real events that are happening. So last year we had over 78,000 preventions. That means that our agents did a voice down and the individual left the property and they didn't commit the crime. They didn't commit the vandalism. And then we only dispatched law enforcement 1,900 times. And out of those 1,900 times, we had 1,000 arrests and detainments, almost 1,100 arrests or detainments. This is across our entire portfolio. Now, the 1,100 arrests or detainments may seem impressive, but what Elite stands by is the amount of crimes that we were able to prevent. The fact that our customers didn't have to show up to the 78,000 times where there was potential for vandalism or theft to happen on their properties. That's what we appreciate. Law enforcement appreciates that we only called them out 1,900 times and there was an actual crime that was taking place and they didn't have to respond to the 78,000 others where we were able to push the individual off the property. So that's the key for the different technology. And our response times are on average across our entire portfolio, 7 seconds. And we're able to resolve those events within 96% of the time. And we have 0 false alarms to law enforcement. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we have our law enforcement partnerships. So again, this to wrap this up real quick, the secret to the success, of course, is that leading edge technology. And part of that is the noise reduction and the 16 elements that we use for us to receive accurate alerts and reduce the noise. The leading edge personnel that we have in our command center. Most of our team is former law enforcement or military, and they're a trained eyewitness to crimes in progress, and they're trained to diffuse situations and prevent crime from happening. And then we have our leading edge partnerships with law enforcement. We have a law enforcement advisory board that's comprised, I had mentioned it before, comprised of police chiefs from across the country. Their whole goal is to educate law enforcement. We also have FBI LEDA partnerships. And we also have law enforcement liaisons who are also former police chiefs. So when we do have a client in a new territory where there's a new agency where we don't have a relationship, they'll go out and create that partnership. We believe that the partnership has to happen with not just only our clients to prevent crime, but also with the local law enforcement and bringing them out to the properties and bringing out the local sergeants so that they understand that when we call them, there is going to be a crime on the other end of that call. That's the short presentation I have, and I'm open to any questions.
Great, Rudy, I really appreciate that. Can you walk us through the remote guarding technology? I'm specifically more interested in, I think our attendees are interested in, specifically how the AI and analytics are trained and calibrated for the different environments.
Yeah, sure. So for us, it's, is understanding, like I had mentioned before, is understanding our clients' security challenges. Every site is very specific. So once we understand that, we select the right technology for it. But above and beyond that, we also look at doing advanced calibrations of those devices. Most of what we do is on the edge, process that initial event on the edge. And then once it leaves the edge, it goes into our cloud AI, which then does further processing of that video and serves it up to us. So when we initially install a system, for us, it's important to do that forensic design, understanding where the issues are, making sure that we're selecting the right equipment for the detection zones that we're looking for. Again, we want to make sure that our detection zones are creating events. Our agents are receiving those events, and they need to be able to assess whether it's a threat or not. So if we're serving up an image that only is 1 pixel, even though the AI is detecting it, then our team can't really discern and will then have to spend time trying to look at other video or PTZs to try to determine whether there's a threat or not. So we want to make sure that the views have the ability to, at least those detections are at least 10% of the screen size. So then our team can then assess it very quickly. And then we get those reductions in those false alarms as well. So it's something that we take very seriously at Elite, because that allows us to reduce the noise. And we go through a whole process. So once we finish deploying a site, we go through a 30-day calibration of that. And what we do is we assess the amount of alarms that we're receiving, how many of them are false versus real alarms. And then we train the AI to eliminate some of those noises. And then we do continuous follow up on that.
Great, thank you. We have a very mixed audience of end users and integrators and some solution providers. For that group, what are some of the best practices they should consider in designing a surveillance system to help minimize the false alarms, and what processes support that goal?
Yeah, so for us, it all starts with the design of the system. And I keep reiterating that, but again, it's understanding where the challenges are, walking a property, understanding whether we're looking at a very busy area or perimeter areas that are being breached, and then placing the right equipment for those applications, and understanding what the detection ranges are on different devices. You could take a fixed camera, and we've seen the detection ranges on those devices be anywhere from 130 feet to 150 feet, 160 feet, very optimal. And then if you're trying to detect something outside of those ranges, then you're going to have mixed results. And so you want to make sure that you're optimizing for the field of view or the detection zones for those specific devices. And then again, designing based off of not trying to overlap too many of those views, because now you're generating even more noise into your command center. Because now, whether it's one person walking in the same scene through one camera, now they're picking them up on other cameras, so that one individual is creating multiple alerts for the same event. There's many different techniques that we use to make sure that we minimize that, and we minimize the overlap in detection coverage, so we get a little bit more accurate that way.
So as we look at this, we talked a lot about the distance of coverage, the location of cameras. Specifically, are there better cameras such as fixed or thermal or PTZ quads that will work better within the system? Or is it system agnostic to what type of camera or sensor it is?
So for us, we have found that there are differences in the different types of cameras and the different ranges. So for long ranges and perimeters, we'll use thermal cameras. And the thermal cameras that we like to use are SiteLogix. They create detection zones that could go up to 300, sometimes 600 feet in length. And those create alerts based off of heat signatures, along with a normal camera view overlap of that event. So when our agents receive that, they get to see the actual camera with an overlap of the thermal and the detection. Now for fixed cameras, yes, it's also important to know that not all edge-based analytics on cameras are the same. We go through an extensive R&D process to determine whether those alerts generated on the edge are accurate. We see a lot of false positives on some devices, even with a lot of the calibration, and with others where you'll have false negatives, which is even worse. So if you're not receiving an alarm for a person or a vehicle, then that could lead to potential miss. And that is even more critical than an over-alarming device. So making sure that the quality of the alarms is good is essential for being able to protect our client sites.
I know that one of the biggest things with monitoring is video fatigue. You know, I have clients that have 10 cameras up to 1,000 cameras, 2,000 cameras in a GSOC, and you know, they're trying to look at the cameras. They're now implementing analytics. We're doing a much better job of it. But how do you train your agents to ensure that they're not getting that video fatigue?
That's a very important question. So again, even though we're processing, you know, that slide that I show where we're processing hours and hours of video, we're only serving up very few. The technology is only serving up the actual events that are taking place. So our command center software presents a queue of events to the agent. And when they click on that event that's happening for that specific site, now they're managing the events for that site. And they get to see a pre and post of what that event is. And they also have the live video of it in an interactive map. Now, nobody is sitting around watching screens. That's almost impossible. And like you said, you'll have that fatigue, and it only takes just a few seconds to be able to miss that one little event that happened, to be able to miss a big event. So for us, it's about the AI serving up that event. They look at it on the queue, they can make notes and dismiss it, and or continue watching that event.
Great. What KPI should security professionals use to measure the response effectiveness? You had that great screen that showed what your responses are, but if I'm selling this to my C-suite, what am I looking and what am I pushing for those KPIs?
So if you were talking about inside of a command center, the most critical are response times. You know, I've, from experience, being in this industry very long in the early days and seeing how technology has helped us eliminate a lot of the false alarms, I've seen our dwell times decrease significantly in the past 3 years. And that is due to the technology. And before, receiving a lot of the older analytics and video motion detection that we see a lot of in these older systems, you can have dwell times that are in the minutes. And if you know that those response times are in the minutes, then you're going to have a lot of misses. And now you're only responding and being reactionary to events that are happening on a site, and you're not able to prevent crime. So understanding the dwell time, and then you can relate that to either staffing or adjusting the technology. The next metric is understanding agents, on how many events they're able to handle per agent. And then we're looking at the alarms that we're receiving total into our command center every night and how that fluctuates, and then how we add the staffing that we need to keep the dwell time down to where we need it to be, which is those 7 seconds. And then again, being able to either add staffing or adjust the technology. One of the things that we do on a weekly basis is pull alarm reports or the data from our systems. We measure everything. So we look at over alarming devices, under alarming devices, and we try to adjust and do continuous adjusting of those devices. And that's how we're able to keep our dwell times low and reduce the fatigue of our agents, because now instead of clicking away at alarms, they're actually handling real events. They're doing their voice downs, they're calling dispatch centers, they're communicating and bringing law enforcement, and they're an extension of law enforcement at that point.
Great, thank you. First question from one of our attendees. Um, Specifically for the Philadelphia market, what has the penetration been like, and do you have any systems active in the area?
Sorry, what area?
Philadelphia.
Um, I believe so, but our penetration, our biggest concentration is in Southern California, Texas. We are out on the East Coast. We have quite a few sites. So we're across the country. Most of our clients are taking us across the country. We even have international accounts. So we can be anywhere in the country.
The same panelist also asked another question. Pennsylvania and Texas, for example, are very spread out, and where you might have a school that's located, nowhere near a local law enforcement or its shared services or it's the state police are responsible for patrolling that area. How has the response times been for like non-life-threatening events versus life-threatening and impact events in like more rural areas where they don't have a huge police presence?
Yeah, I think it's even more critical because now we're the first responders to those events that are happening on the site. And we're the ones that are diffusing the situation by being able to get there within those seconds and being able to do a voice down, sound a siren, do a strobe. And at that point, from the data that we've seen, 96% of those individuals are leaving the property. Now, when we do have a crime that is or starting to escalate to a crime, that's when we call out the law enforcement. And then again, it goes back to that law enforcement relationship. We believe very strongly that we have to create that relationship and that understanding that when we do call you out, it's because there is a true event happening on the site that needs to be responded to. So what we've seen across the country is that it is very effective. We get very good response time from law enforcement. And if for whatever reason it's not happening, then our law enforcement advisory board and liaisons will contact the agency. And we understand that sometimes there are other emergencies that are happening at the same time, but at least we're able to diffuse those situations ourselves majority of the time.
Do you ever run into a situation where you're not necessarily calling the police, but maybe it's a health emergency and you're calling EMTs or local hospitals?
That's a good point. We do that quite often. We do a lot of senior housing, and we've multiple times where there's a medical emergency, we're calling EMS when either somebody gets locked out of their buildings or somebody falls over. A lot of times we get those events and we're able to call emergency services to respond. That happens quite often.
Are there any situations in which you're also monitoring access control, intrusion detection, or other types of ambient alarms along with the video?
Yeah, we try to keep those devices because they're prone to falsing from what we do and rely specifically on the analytics or the AI. The only other kind of integration that we do would be with the access control. So if there is a forced entry, then we can tie that trigger with a camera that's there to kind of validate that alarm. And now we know that that individual walking through that door has forced their way in, and then we can tie those two together. But as far as alarms, we don't integrate with those.
Can you, what's the ongoing maintenance and recalibration or requirements to keep the AI and camera systems fresh?
So it goes back to the data that we gather, right? So we're gathering the data, we're tracking trends on individual cameras as far as the alarming amount, individual sites by the alarming amount. We start to see a trend where a device is over alarming. Our team will go and look at it, or under alarming. We'll go look at it, and sometimes we'll find out, hey, they planted a tree or put a tree in front of this or overgrown, and now it's blocking our view. Now it's reducing the amount of alarms that we used to getting, so on and so forth. So then at that point, we're always on top of that. We do this weekly, and we have a special team that does this. So it is there is a lot of effort to improve the quality of the alarms so that we avoid what you described as the agent fatigue of answering those alarms, the alarms that we receive. And so it's all kind of tied together.
Can you talk about the ability to scale from a college campus to an auto dealership to multifamily housing or huge industrial sites, a data center, for example, or transportation systems location?
Yeah, so we do many different verticals, and they're all very similar in the fact that I don't want a person in this place and detected. If we detect it, then we do a voice down and then we call law enforcement, or we could be a force multiplier, especially for a large campus, where at that point we are using the on-site security guards to investigate an event. So we're calling them first. First, we receive the alert, we do our voice down. If we see anything suspicious but no real crime, then we call the on-site security guards and they go investigate. Now, if we see a crime and we don't want to get those security officers involved, again, they're there to observe and report, not to engage. So we wouldn't want to put them in harm's way. We at that point call law enforcement and we call the security officers and let them know that law enforcement is showing up for a crime that is occurring, and they're there to kind of escort law enforcement to those areas and help out on site to be able to provide that support.
So, how do you see the industry incorporating new emerging technologies, specifically with AI-driven technology, drones, robotics, more advanced behavioral analytics? I know one of my clients on the call is very interested in slips and falls and those type of things in a mall environment or high-rise office building, where it can be years before somebody actually comes back and reports it. But the ability to kind of see it that it could possibly happen or give you an advance warning that it's happening. How close are you to integrating those technologies?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is have an R&D department, and we're always assessing new technologies before we actually deploy them. We are in the process of getting ready to deploy new behavioral analytics that would help us. So we're always adopting that new technology, and the way that we see that it can help us out is the crowd disbursement or the crowd gathering, so that we can start monitoring other critical areas and events that take place where you have a sea of people, but if there's an anomaly in those events, then we could be able to quickly receive those alerts without having to stare at monitors. Others like license plate recognition and being able to compare those to databases that we keep on file to create those events. Those are all things that we can currently deploy and create events for. So there's a whole host of different technologies that we'll use, but we're also adding more to our stack.
One of the issues, regardless of where a K through 12 school or school district may be located, is student loitering in hallways. A lot of schools are spending money on video surveillance and other types of alarm systems and on-site security officers. But we haven't quite been able to get the ability that somebody's always looking at the cameras or providing information, especially where you run into corridors and things where students are loitering in the hallways. Have you had any of those type of things come up, and any successful stories you can share?
Yeah, so we do quite a few different school districts and private schools and campuses. Our goal there is, the after hours monitoring and being the daytime support for any events that are happening. So we're not proactively monitoring hallways or those types of events, but we do have lockdown events that we monitor. So specifically at several of our sites, we have duress buttons that our customers currently had that we tied into that go through an IP-based PA system that we've deployed. And when those events or somebody presses that arrest button, then the lockdown announcement goes out to the students, and they have a whole drill for where they're going to go. And then those alerts go back into our command center. We know exactly where those were triggered. And now our team jumps into action and are able to then see what is taking place on site. They're able to call law enforcement and give this information directly to the dispatchers and disperse it to law enforcement. So they're not showing up to the unknown. At that point, we'll have a description of the individual, whether they're armed, whether there's multiple individuals. So it's a program that we put together for schools that is effective at being able to get faster response times and video to these events.
Is it a love-hate relationship with the security guard force management companies, or is it something that they're also looking to embrace with short staffing and everything else that's happening in the market?
You know, what we've seen is typically we're either replacing the on-site security guards. We're much more cost effective and can cover more ground. Unfortunately, a single security guard, he can only see and hear what's in front of him. And again, they're not supposed to intervene with any events. Whereas with us, instead of having one person at one place, now we have 20, 30 digital guards on our client site. We can see, hear, intervene, and then dispatch law enforcement. So it's much more effective. We do have customers that use security guards, but we're typically managing that part of the service where we're receiving the events and we're dispatching that on-site security officer, and they're just doing their normal patrols at that point as well. But when we do have an event, they go to those events. I see a trend where, you know, they are starting to try to create and or adopt the remote guarding or video monitoring aspect of it. But unfortunately, you know, for them, their model is the human element, and replacing that with a lower cost version of it doesn't make sense for them. So they're putting it as an add-on, but it's not as effective. We've seen, or our customers have experienced, that it's not as effective because it's just not as sophisticated. We've had many, many years of refining our systems and technology, being elite, being in the industry for 15 years. We've been able to kind of master being able to reduce the alarms and responding within seconds to any event on our client sites.
Great. I'd like to turn it over. Are there any questions from the attendees? Boy, Rudy, I think you did a great job. We covered pretty much all the questions, and a couple of questions that were asked, we even addressed those already. Getting some good positive feedback about what a great job you did and everything. So I really appreciate that. And looking forward to hearing more about the technologies and what you guys are looking to do in the future.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate everybody joining, and it's always fun to talk about what we do.
Great. Now, as I mentioned before, we will be making the link to the live recording available, and I'll send out to all the attendees today. Thank you very much for participating in our webinar today, and I look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Have a great day. Stay safe, stay secure. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.